Story 1. The sky was painted in deep shades of purple and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon, marking the arrival of Halloween night. I felt a thrill of excitement rush through me as I adjusted my pointy black hat. I was dressed as a witch, complete with a flowing black dress and a broomstick that was more of a prop than anything else. My friends Sarah and Lily were by my side, both sporting their own costumes. Sarah as a sparkling fairy and Lily as a ghoulish ghost. Ready to get the best candy ever? I exclaimed, my heart racing. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of autumn leaves and the faint sound of laughter echoing down the street. Let's go, Sarah shouted, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. We darted down the street, our footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered with warm candlelight, their grinning faces illuminating the path ahead, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging and joy. Trick-or-treating was the highlight of my year, and this night was no exception. Look at that house. Lily pointed to a grand Victorian on the corner, its porch adorned with cobwebs and skeletons. They always give out the best candy. We rushed up to the door, my excitement bubbling over as I knocked. Trick or treat, I chorused with my friends, our voices blending in harmony. The door swung open, revealing a kind old lady with a basket overflowing with colorful treats. Hello, dearies. Take as much as you like, she said, her smile warm and inviting. As we filled our bags with candy, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. But as we continued down the street, my heart began to race for a different reason. The darkness of the night crept in, and I glanced back at the glowing houses, feeling an eerie chill in the air. Hey, wait up, I called out as I realized I had fallen behind. My friends were already a few houses ahead. I'll catch up. I turned to grab a handful of candy from my bag when I heard a rustling behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding. Hello, I called out, but the only response was the whisper of the wind. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling of unease creeping into my chest. It was just my imagination, I told myself. I was a witch on Halloween after all. Nothing could scare me. I quickened my pace, but as I arrived at the next house, my friends were nowhere in sight. Guys, I called again, my voice wavering slightly. The laughter and chatter of trick-or-treaters faded into the distance, leaving me standing alone on the moonlit street. Panic began to settle in my stomach as I turned around, hoping to see them approaching. Sarah, Lily, I shouted, my voice echoing in the stillness. I walked further down the street, the shadows growing longer and the air colder. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered ominously, casting eerie shapes on the pavement. The cheerful atmosphere had transformed into something dark and unsettling. This isn't funny, I yelled, my heart racing. A knot of dread twisted in my stomach as I realized I was completely alone. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Maybe they're just at the next house, I reasoned. I'll just go check. But as I moved forward, each step felt heavier, the weight of fear pressing down on me. The neighborhood that had once seemed so vibrant and alive now felt like a labyrinth of shadows. I could feel the chill of the night creeping into my bones as I called out for my friends one last time, hoping they would respond. Please, where are you? But the only answer was the sound of my own voice lost in the darkness. I felt a chill sweep over me, and for the first time, I truly understood the meaning of fear. Halloween had turned from a night of joy into one filled with uncertainty and dread. And in that moment, I had no idea that my life, and the lives of everyone in St. Louis, was about to change forever. The night air was thick with tension as police officers swarmed the neighborhood, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my heart racing, desperately trying to comprehend the enormity of what was happening. Emily was missing. The words echoed in my mind, refusing to settle. I hugged myself tightly, as if that would somehow shield me from the dread that had settled over our community like a heavy fog. Ma'am, have you seen this girl? A police officer approached my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, thrusting a flyer into her hands. I caught a glimpse of Emily's smiling face, the witch's hat askew on her head, and I felt a pang of sorrow. She was just a kid, our kid. The laughter that had filled the streets hours ago was replaced by a haunting silence, punctuated only by the distant wails of sirens and the murmurs of frantic parents. Tom, what are we going to do? Sarah's voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched her husband's arm. They were standing just a few feet away, their expressions a mix of desperation and disbelief. I wanted to comfort them, tell them that everything would be okay, but the truth gnawed at my insides. What if it wasn't okay? We have to stay positive, Sarah. The police are doing everything they can, Tom replied, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. He looked around, searching for something, anything, that could provide reassurance. I could see the flicker of hope dimming as the minutes turned into hours. I stepped closer to them, wanting to offer my support. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah turned to me, her face streaked with tears, and I felt my heart break for her. Just help us search," she said, her voice cracking. "Please. We can't just stand here." Nodding, I felt a surge of determination wash over me. "Let's organize a search party. We can check the parks and the alleyways. Maybe someone has seen her." I grabbed Sarah's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Okay," Tom agreed, his expression hardening with resolve. "Let's get everyone together." As we moved through the streets, gathering neighbors and friends, I kept stealing glances at the posters plastered on telephone poles, each one bearing Emily's face, each one a stark reminder of the reality we faced. The darkness felt oppressive, as if it were conspiring against us, swallowing our hopes one by one. "Did you hear anything?" I overheard one of the officers asking a group of kids who had been trick-or-treating. They were huddled together, faces pale, candy bags forgotten at their feet. "No, we didn't see her," one of the boys exclaimed, his voice shaky. "We just kept calling her name." "Keep your eyes peeled and don't wander off," the officer instructed, his tone firm but kind. I could see the barely concealed panic in the children's eyes, a reflection of the fear that had gripped all of us. Hours turned into a blur as I searched with the others, combing through every corner of our neighborhood. We shouted Emily's name into the night, our voices ringing out in the stillness, but the only response was the rustling of leaves in the wind. I felt a chill run down my spine, not just from the cold but from the reality of our situation. Just when I thought the night couldn't feel any darker, a shadow caught my eye, a figure lurking in the distance watching us. I squinted, trying to make out who it was, but the darkness obscured their features. My heart raced again, this time with a different kind of fear. "Hey!" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty street. "What are you doing over there?" The figure stiffened but didn't move. Instead, a slow, sinister smile crept across their face, sending a shiver up my spine. It was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn, a twisted delight at the chaos that had unfolded. "Who are you?" someone shouted from the group, but the figure merely turned and melted into the shadows, leaving us with a sense of foreboding that hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "Let's keep searching," Tom urged, breaking the spell of unease that had settled over us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the night held more secrets than we could possibly unravel. The night air was thick with dread, and the usual sounds of Halloween, the laughter of children, the rustling of costumes, and the distant sound of fireworks, had faded into an eerie silence. It felt as if the world was holding its breath. I squinted into the dark, my heart pounding in my chest as I clutched the hem of my witch costume, still damp with the sweat of panic. "Emily, where are you?" My voice broke the stillness, but there was no answer, just the echo of my call fading into the night. Just hours before, I had been filled with excitement as I dashed down the street with my friends, our bags bulging with candy. "Did you see how many houses we've hit?" I had laughed, my eyes wide with the thrill of it all. "We're going to have the best haul." But that joy quickly evaporated. I could still picture the moment it happened. I had wandered off just for a second, drawn to a house with the most elaborate decorations. The last thing I remembered was the porch light flickering ominously before everything went dark. The panic set in swiftly. My friends had continued without me, blissfully unaware that I had vanished into the shadows. "Maybe she's just playing a prank," one of them had suggested, but deep down I felt something was very wrong. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by shouts, frantic calls ringing through the neighborhood as families began to gather, their faces painted with worry. "Tom, maybe she just got lost in the neighborhood," Sarah, my mom, suggested, her voice trembling as she clung to my dad. "She always comes back. She has to." But I could see the fear in her eyes, the way they darted around, searching for me in every shadow, every corner. I wanted to scream to let them know I was okay, but I was too frightened to make a sound. As the hours dragged on, the reality of my disappearance settled in like a heavy fog. The police arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the night with a harsh reality. Officers moved quickly, speaking to neighbors, handing out flyers with my picture, and shining flashlights into the darkness. "We'll find her," one officer assured my parents, but even his comforting tone felt hollow amidst the rising tension. Days passed with no sign of me, and the search efforts intensified. I could hear the distant sounds of search parties combing through the nearby parks, calling my name, but I remained trapped in a world far removed from their frantic search. I had been taken to a place that felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, a dark, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, hidden from the prying eyes of the world. But one day everything changed. I heard it, a voice cutting through the silence. Hello? Is anyone there? I pressed my ear against the cold, damp wall, my heart leaping. It was faint but filled with urgency. I wanted to shout, to scream that I was there, but fear kept my voice locked away. I listened as the voice grew louder, determined. I can hear you. Hold on. Suddenly the door burst open and light flooded the room. My eyes squinted against the brightness, and there he was, a local construction worker, his face filled with concern and determination. Emily, he exclaimed, rushing toward me. I'm here to help you. With shaky hands he reached out, pulling me from the darkness. I stumbled forward, tears streaming down my cheeks as I took in the sight of freedom. You're safe now, I promise, he said, his voice calming amidst the chaos. As the police arrived moments later, their voices a blur of reassurance and urgency, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But as they led me away, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. I was safe, yes, but the horrors I had faced would not vanish so easily. Emily, can you tell us what happened? An officer asked gently, his pen poised over a notepad. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the weight of fear. I wanted to tell them everything to make sense of the nightmare, but the memories danced just out of reach, elusive and painful. I don't remember, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded, his expression a mix of sympathy and concern. As I looked around at the faces of those who had come to find me, I realized that while I might be physically free, the scars of this Halloween would linger far longer than the candy I had once collected. As I sat in the small, dimly lit room of the police station, the weight of the world pressed down on my chest. The walls were painted a dull gray, and a fluorescent light flickered above me, casting erratic shadows. I could hear the distant murmur of voices and the occasional clatter of chairs, but all I could focus on was the sound of my heart thumping in my ears. Detective Harris entered, his expression serious but not unkind. He sat across from me, his notepad poised and ready. Emily, he began gently, I know this is hard, but we need your help. Can you tell me what he looked like? I swallowed hard, the memory of that night flooding back like a tidal wave. He had dark hair and a beard, I stammered, my voice trembling. He smiled a lot, but it was creepy. Like he was enjoying it. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to shield myself from the memories. Can you remember anything else? Maybe the way he talked. Detective Harris urged, his pen scratching against the paper. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure the details. He kept saying I was special, that he wanted to keep me safe. But I didn't feel safe at all. I felt trapped. Tears welled in my eyes and I blinked them away. He had a trailer out by the edge of town. I could see the trees from the window. Good, Emily, that's very helpful. He leaned in closer, his voice low and steady. Can you tell me anything about where you were taken after that? I hesitated, the images swirling in my mind. He took me to a dark room. There were no windows. It smelled like old food and something else I couldn't place. I just wanted to go home. My voice cracked at the end, and I felt the familiar sting of panic rising in my throat. As I spoke, I could see the detective's expression shift. He nodded, jotting down notes, his brow furrowing in concentration. We're going to find him, Emily. I promise you that. After what felt like an eternity, Detective Harris finally stood up, thanking me for my bravery. As he left the room, I was left alone with the echoes of my own thoughts. Would they really find him? Would I ever feel safe again? Just then, my parents rushed into the room, their faces etched with worry. My mom knelt beside me, her arms wrapping around me tightly. Oh, Emily. We were so scared, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We thought we lost you forever. I'm okay, Mom, I said softly, though I could feel the tremors still coursing through my body. They're trying to catch him. My dad stood behind my mom, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. We're going to make sure he pays for what he did, he said, his voice low but fierce. No one should go through what you did, honey. As my parents comforted me, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me, relief that I was with them again, but also anger. Anger at the man who took me, anger at myself for getting lost in the first place. My mind raced as I replayed the events of that night, my friends calling my name, the laughter that turned to screams. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire through St. Louis. I overheard snippets of conversations as my parents discussed the situation with friends and neighbors. They caught him, my dad said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and rage. Mark Sullivan, of all people. He's been in and out of prison for years. Can you believe it? My mom replied, shaking her head in disbelief. He used to live right around here. I felt a chill run down my spine at the thought of Mark Sullivan, a name that now sent shivers through the very fabric of our community. It was hard to reconcile the man they described with the one I had encountered. I had seen his face, but I never really knew him, not like everyone else seemed to. As the days passed, I watched my parents grow increasingly anxious. They were protective now, hovering over me like mother hens. "You can't go out alone anymore, Emily," my dad insisted one evening. "Not until we know he's locked up for good." "I know, Dad," I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. "But I just want to go back to normal. I want to trick-or-treat again, to see my friends." My mom sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We just need time, sweetheart. We want you to be safe." But what did safe even mean anymore? The Halloween I once cherished had morphed into a haunting memory, a reminder of what could happen when darkness crept too close. I felt like a ghost wandering through my own life, grappling with the shadows that lurked just beyond my reach. As Halloween approached once more, I could sense the tension in the air. The decorations went up, the candy was stocked, but the laughter rang hollow. It felt like an impending storm, and I could only hope we would find shelter from the chaos that had taken root in our lives. As I sat in the small, stark room at the police station, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. The walls were painted a cold blue, and the fluorescent light buzzed above, casting a harsh glow that felt too bright for such a dark moment. Detective Ryan, a burly man with a kind face but tired eyes, sat across from me. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together, the tension palpable in the air. "Emily," he began gently, "I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night. Every detail matters." I took a deep breath, my stomach churning at the recollection. I was with my friends and we were going to the old Thompson house. "It's just a funny rumor, you know? They said it was haunted." My voice trembled as I spoke. "We dared each other to go up to the porch, and that's when I saw him." "Who did you see?" Detective Ryan prompted, his pen poised over the notepad. "A man. He was standing by the bushes," I murmured, the memory flashing vividly in my mind. "He looked really weird, like he was watching us. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, it was Halloween, right? Did you notice anything else about him? Anything unusual?" His smile was creepy, like he was up to something. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images that flooded my mind. But then we got our candy and I wanted to keep trick-or-treating. The detective nodded, encouraging me. "And what happened next?" "I walked away from my friends. I thought I heard someone calling my name, but it wasn't them. It was him," I stammered, the fear rising in my chest. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the dark. I couldn't scream. I was too scared. I froze. "Emily, you did nothing wrong. You were a child. It's not your fault," he reassured me, but I couldn't shake the guilt that clung to me. I remember being in the car. He had his hand over my mouth and I could hardly breathe. I kept thinking about my mom and dad. What would they do? Would they find me? Tears streamed down my cheeks as I recalled the terror of that moment. "Can you tell me what he said?" Detective Ryan asked softly. "Something about making me quiet," I whispered, the words feeling like venom on my tongue. "He said I'd be safe, that no one would find me." But I knew he was lying. As I spoke, I could see the anger flickering in the detective's eyes. "You're very brave, Emily. This information is crucial." He paused, then added, "We need to understand him to know why he did this." "Why?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. He just wanted to hurt me. I don't understand why anyone would want to do that." Detective Ryan sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "Some people have dark desires, Emily. They don't think like you or me. They see the world differently and it makes them do terrible things." I shivered at his words, feeling a chill creep down my spine. "But why me? I didn't do anything wrong." "Sometimes it's not about what you did. It's about who they are," he said, his tone heavy with sorrow. "You're going to be okay. We're going to make sure he never gets to hurt anyone else again." I nodded, wiping my tears with the sleeve of my witch costume, the fabric scratchy against my skin. "I just want to go home." After what felt like an eternity, the questioning ended. I was taken to a small waiting room where my parents were. Their faces were etched with a mix of relief and concern, and I ran into their arms, feeling the warmth and safety I had longed for. "Emily, we were so worried," my mom cried, holding me tightly. "I'm okay, Mom." "I'm okay," I whispered, though inside I felt anything but. As the days passed, I found myself in therapy, trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered world. The nightmares came every night, vivid and unrelenting. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, the haunting images of that man invading my dreams. "Emily, you're safe now," my therapist, Dr. Miller, would say as I curled up on the couch in her office. "Let's talk about what you're feeling. It's important to express those feelings." "I don't want to talk about it," I would reply, my voice muffled against the cushions. But she was patient, and slowly I began to share snippets of my experience. Each word felt like a stone lifted from my chest. "Do you remember anything else about him?" Dr. Miller would ask. "I remember his eyes," I said one day, the image still fresh in my mind. "They were cold like ice. I could see there was nothing behind them." "Good. You're doing great, Emily. That's important," she encouraged, her voice soothing. But as the trial approached, anxiety settled deep within me. The thought of facing him again, the man who had taken my freedom, was terrifying. Yet there was a determination within me to confront the darkness that had overshadowed my life. I needed to reclaim my story, to find my voice in a world that had tried to silence me. The day of the trial felt like a surreal dream wrapped in a nightmare. I stood in the courthouse, my heart racing, the walls around me echoing with the whispers of the audience. I could feel the weight of their eyes, a mix of sympathy, curiosity, and judgment. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I gripped the edges of the stand. The air was thick with tension, and my stomach churned as I prepared to confront the man who had stolen my freedom. "Emily Parker, please take the stand," the bailiff called, and I could hear the faint rustle of my mother's dress in the gallery behind me. I glanced back, catching her anxious expression. She gave me a small nod, her eyes filled with encouragement, and I stepped forward, drawing on every ounce of courage I had. As I recounted the details of that horrifying night, the darkness, the fear, and the chilling laughter of Mark Sullivan, I felt my voice tremble. "He told me no one was coming for me," I whispered, my throat tightening. "He said I was all alone." The words hung in the air, heavy with the truth of my trauma. My lawyer, a kind woman named Ms. Harris, nodded encouragingly. "And what happened next, Emily?" He kept me in a dark room," I stammered, the memories flooding back. "There was a small window, but it was too high for me to reach. I could see the jury leaning in, their expressions a mix of horror and disbelief. Just as I thought I had reached the climax of my testimony, the courtroom door swung open with a loud bang, startling everyone. A man burst in, his face pale and wild, and all eyes turned toward him. He was Mark's brother. I recognized him immediately from family photos I'd seen during the investigation. "Stop. You can't believe her," he shouted, panic in his voice. "There's something you all need to know." The judge pounded his gavel, but the chaos was already erupting. "Order. Order in the court." But no one was quieting down. Murmurs filled the room, and I felt my heart race even faster. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling, laced with confusion and fear. "Mark isn't who you think he is," he yelled, his eyes darting around as if he were searching for escape. "He's been lying to everyone. You don't know the truth about your family, Emily." "Your family?" My heart sank. "What do you mean?" There was a moment of silence, a suffocating pause as the courtroom held its breath. Then he pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're related. Mark is your uncle. Your father and his mother?" He choked on the words, gasping as if the revelation was too much for him to bear. "They're siblings." Gasps echoed around the room, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I turned to my mother, who looked as shocked as I felt. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The courtroom erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some were crying, others were incredulous. My mind raced, struggling to process what I had just heard. Mark, my captor, the man who had taken me, who had hurt me, was somehow tied to my family? How could this be? "Emily," Ms. Harris urged, trying to regain control of the stand. "You don't have to listen to him." But I was frozen, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The implications of his words twisted in my mind. Trust? Who could I trust now? My heart felt heavy with betrayal and fear. The very fabric of my life, my family, was unraveling before me. As the bailiff tried to escort the man out, I caught glimpses of the jury, their faces a mix of disbelief and concern. I felt like I was in a dream, a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The truth was spiraling out of control, and as the screen of my reality faded to black, I realized that the consequences of this revelation would haunt me far longer than the memories of my captivity. It was the beginning of a deeper conspiracy, one that would change everything I thought I knew about myself and the world around me. Story 2. The sun was just beginning to set over Riverside, casting long shadows that danced along the cracked pavement, reflecting the unease that had settled in the town. I gripped my notepad tightly, feeling the weight of the recent tragedies pressing down on my chest as I approached my first interview of the evening. The woman's name was Mrs. Thompson, and she was standing on her porch, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a mug of chamomile tea, the steam rising like a ghost in the dusky light. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in my stomach. "I know it must be difficult." She nodded, her eyes darting to the street as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. "I just don't understand how this could happen here. We've always felt safe in Riverside. What can you tell me about the night of the murder?" I asked, flipping my notepad open, ready to capture every word. Mrs. Thompson took a shaky breath, setting her mug down on the porch railing. "I heard the screams. It was around 10 o'clock. I thought it was just some kids messing around, you know? But then I saw the lights, the police lights. I knew something was wrong. They found her, in her own home." I scribbled notes furiously, my heart racing. "Did you see anyone suspicious in the area?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, just darkness. But I felt it. There's something out there, Sarah. Something evil." I looked up from my notes, meeting her wide, fearful eyes. "I promise I'll do my best to find out what's happening." As I left Mrs. Thompson's house, the chill in the air sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness she described was creeping closer, wrapping its icy fingers around Riverside. I walked to my car, the weight of the story heavy on my shoulders, knowing that as a journalist, I had a responsibility to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Just as I slid into the driver's seat, my phone buzzed violently against the dashboard. It was a text from my editor, demanding updates on the articles I'd been working on. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the importance of my role. People needed to know what was happening in their town. "Sarah, you there?" A gruff voice broke through my thoughts. It was Detective Mark Thompson, the lead investigator on the case. I had met him briefly at the precinct, and his reputation for being thorough and relentless had preceded him. "Yeah, I'm here. Just finished an interview with one of the neighbors," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Good. I'm at the latest crime scene now. You should come." His tone was clipped, a hint of urgency making my stomach drop. "I'll be there in 10, I said, already pulling out of the driveway and into the growing darkness of Riverside. When I arrived, the flashing lights of police cars illuminated the area like a carnival gone wrong. Officers were combing through the house, their expressions grim. Detective Thompson stood near the entrance, his silhouette stark against the backdrop of chaos. "Sarah," he acknowledged with a nod, his face taut with concentration. "I need you to stay back. This is a crime scene." "I understand, but I can help," I insisted, stepping closer despite his warning. "Not this time," he replied firmly, crossing his arms. "We've got a dead body in there. I don't want you getting involved in anything you can't handle." I swallowed hard, the sight of the body bag being wheeled out sending a wave of nausea through me. "I can handle it. People need to know what's happening. The fear is spreading." He studied me for a moment, the lines on his forehead deepening. "Okay, but stick to the facts. I'll get you an official statement later." As I watched the investigators work, a chill ran down my spine. The silence that followed a scream was deafening. Just as I was about to turn away, my phone buzzed again, this time with an anonymous message. "Meet me at the old mill. I know who the killer is." My heart raced. Intrigued and terrified, I glanced at Thompson, who was busy directing his team. This was the break I needed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something darker than I could ever imagine. I took a deep breath, knowing that the shadows of Riverside were only beginning to reveal their secrets. The sun dipped low over Riverside, casting elongated shadows across the cracked pavement as I approached the old, abandoned house. The air was thick with a chilling anticipation that mirrored the tension in my chest. This was no ordinary investigation. It felt like stepping into a ghost story, where the whispers of the past beckoned me forward. My fingers grazed the peeling paint of the doorframe as I paused, recalling the anonymous tip that had led me here. "The killer's past is buried within these walls," the message had said, lingering in my mind like a specter. "Do you really think this is where he came from?" I muttered to myself, a nervous habit I had developed during my many solitary pursuits. The house loomed before me, its broken windows resembling hollow eyes watching my every move. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open, its rusty hinges creaking like an old man waking from a long slumber. Dust motes danced in the dim light as I stepped inside, the air stale and heavy, filled with the scent of mildew and decay. The floorboards groaned under my weight, a sound that felt amplified in the eerie silence. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing fragments of a life long forgotten. A tattered armchair, a broken mirror, and walls adorned with faded wallpaper that whispered stories of happier times. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling as it echoed through the empty hall. I half expected a response, half dreading it. The silence answered me, and I moved deeper into the house, my heart racing. As I entered what appeared to be a living room, I noticed a staircase leading to the upper floor, its banister splintered and warped. I hesitated, but the weight of my journalistic curiosity propelled me forward. Ascending the stairs, I felt a shiver run down my spine. This place was steeped in secrets, and I was determined to uncover them. At the top, I found a long hallway lined with closed doors. I approached the first door, hesitating before pushing it open. It creaked ominously, revealing a small, dust-covered bedroom. "Just an old room," I whispered, trying to reassure myself. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A glint of metal beneath the bed. I knelt down and pulled out a rusted box. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a collection of photographs, yellowed and frayed at the edges. I gasped. They were pictures of the victims, smiling faces frozen in time, unaware of the terror that awaited them. Each photo was a haunting reminder of their tragic fates. I quickly flipped through the stack, my fingers trembling. There were more photographs than I had expected, each one meticulously labeled with dates and locations. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind me. I whipped around, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. Silence enveloped me once more, but adrenaline surged through my veins. I had to get out of here. Clutching the box tightly, I rushed toward the door, but as I reached for the handle, I froze. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. "Sarah," a voice called out, a familiar tone that sent a wave of relief crashing over me. It was Detective Mark Thompson. I swung the door open, nearly colliding with him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, concern etched across his face. I got a tip," I stammered, my breath coming in quick bursts. "I found something. You need to see this." Thompson's eyes narrowed and he stepped inside, scanning the room. "We don't have time for games, Sarah. The city is pressuring us for results. We need to focus on leads, not ghost stories." "This isn't a joke," I insisted, urgency fueling my voice. I opened the box, and his expression shifted from skepticism to horror as he examined the photographs. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his tone serious now. "In the bedroom," I replied, still shaken. "I think it's connected to the murders. These women—" "I need to take this to the precinct," he interrupted, his eyes locked onto mine, filled with a mix of determination and dread. "You have to stay safe, Sarah. You're playing with fire." I nodded, but deep down I felt a stirring of defiance. I couldn't back down now. The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows of Riverside, and I was going to uncover it, no matter the cost. I sat across from Detective Mark Thompson in the cramped corner booth of a diner, the smell of bacon and burnt coffee hanging heavy in the air. The faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above us did little to dispel the tension that crackled like static. I leaned forward, my heart racing with anticipation. "Mark, you have to see these photographs I found," I said, sliding the manila folder across the table. He glanced at the contents, his brow furrowing. "Where did you get these, Sarah?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he feared the truth would echo too loudly in the quiet diner. "From the hidden room in that abandoned house." "I think it's connected to the murders," I replied, my fingers fidgeting nervously with the edge of the folder. "All the victims, they were part of the same support group. Look at the dates. They line up perfectly with the murders." Thompson flipped through the photographs, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "You're saying these women were targeted because of their involvement in this group? That's a hell of a leap, Sarah." "Maybe," I conceded, my voice steady despite the uncertainty. "But it's worth investigating. Don't you see? If they're all trauma survivors, there could be a deeper reason behind why someone is killing them." He leaned back, crossing his arms, his eyes narrowing as he considered my words. "All right, I'll bite. But we need to tread carefully. If this killer is connected to the group, we could be walking into a trap." "Then let's investigate together," I suggested, my heart racing at the thought of collaborating with him. "We could attend a meeting and see if anyone acts suspiciously." Thompson sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "You know this could put you in danger, right? I don't want you getting involved in something you can't handle." "I can handle it," I insisted, my resolve strengthening. "I've come this far. I can't back down now." He studied me for a moment, then nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Fine. But you follow my lead, and if it gets too risky, we're out." "Understood." "Understood," I replied, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. As we left the diner, the weight of our shared mission settled over us. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange hue across the riverside skyline. I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread as we headed toward the support group meeting. The thought of stepping into a room filled with trauma survivors, women who had suffered unimaginable horrors, made my stomach churn. Arriving at the community center, I felt the heavy air of shared grief clinging to the walls. As we entered the small room, I scanned the faces of the women seated in a circle. Each one wore an expression that echoed pain, resilience, and fear. "Remember, stick to the plan," Thompson murmured as we took our seats at the far end of the circle. A facilitator began the meeting, her voice soothing yet firm. "Welcome everyone. We're here to share and support each other. Let's begin with introductions." As names and stories were shared, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. Each woman's tale was a raw reminder of the darkness that lingered in their pasts. When it was my turn, I introduced myself simply, trying to mask my nervousness. "I'm Sarah, a journalist. I'm here to listen and learn." Thompson's demeanor was calm, but I could sense his watchful gaze, ever alert for any sign of danger. After several women spoke, one stood out to me, Emily, the group's leader. Her presence was magnetic, her words wrapping around the room like a warm blanket. "We're all here to heal," she said, her voice steady. "But we must also face our fears. Together we can find strength." I glanced at Thompson and he nodded subtly, indicating he was just as intrigued by her as I was. As the meeting continued, my mind raced with possibilities. What if Emily held the key to this entire mystery? I felt the weight of the photographs in my bag, the urgency to uncover the truth pressing down on me. Then, as the meeting drew to a close, a chill ran down my spine. I noticed a woman in the back, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if expecting someone to pounce. The atmosphere shifted and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Just as we stood to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart plummeting as I read the message. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." I looked at Thompson, the color draining from my face. "Mark, I think we're in deeper than we realized." He frowned, his expression hardening. "We need to get out of here. Now." As we hurried out, the weight of the threat loomed over us, a dark shadow following our every step. The investigation was no longer just a story, it had become a fight for survival. The sun hung low over Riverside, casting elongated shadows that danced along the cracked sidewalks, a stark reminder of the darkness enveloping our town. I could feel the weight of dread in the air as I approached the community center where the support group met. The building, a once bright yellow, had faded over time, much like the spirits of those who sought solace within its walls. It seemed that with each passing day the line between victim and predator grew blurrier, and I was determined to uncover the truth. As I stepped inside, the murmur of anxious voices reached my ears. I spotted Detective Thompson seated in the corner, his brow furrowed in concentration as he reviewed notes. I joined him, my heart racing. "Did you find anything?" I asked, leaning in closer. He looked up, his expression a mixture of frustration and determination. "Just more of the same. Everyone is scared, but no one wants to talk. It's like they're all hiding something." He paused, his gaze drifting to the group members, each one a potential witness or worse, a suspect. I nodded, feeling a surge of resolve. What if we approach them together? Maybe they'll open up to a detective rather than just a journalist. Thompson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's worth a shot. But we need to tread carefully. These people are already on edge." We waited until the meeting ended, and as the attendees trickled out, I introduced myself. The air was thick with tension, and I felt the eyes of the women on me as if I were a hawk circling its prey. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" Thompson asked, his voice steady but gentle. One woman, a petite figure with tear-streaked cheeks, hesitated. "You're not here to ask about the murders, are you?" Her voice trembled, and I could sense the fear radiating from her. Thompson exchanged a glance with me before responding. "We just want to understand what happened. You're safe here, we promise." "I don't know if I can," she whispered, stepping back. "They're all connected and it's too dangerous." My pulse quickened. "Connected? Oh, please, we need to know." She bit her lip, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "The last woman who went missing, she was part of this group. We all had our reasons for being here, but some of us, we're not who we seem." Before I could push her for more, she turned and fled into the night, her silhouette swallowed by the shadows. Thompson cursed under his breath, frustration evident on his face. "This is a dead end." But I felt a spark of hope. "No," she said something important. "There's a connection we're missing." We spent the next hour talking to the remaining members, but no one seemed willing to share anything of substance. It was as if they were bound by an unspoken pact of silence. Just as we were about to leave, a woman with fiery red hair approached us, her expression resolute. "I know you're looking for answers," she said, her voice unwavering. "But be careful. There are things happening in this group that you wouldn't understand." "What do you mean?" I pressed, eager to grasp any thread of information. "There's a darkness here, something we can't ignore. People aren't who they pretend to be." Her eyes flickered with fear. "You should leave this alone." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving me with a sense of foreboding. Thompson and I exchanged exasperated glances. "Should we follow her?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I shook my head. "No, we need to regroup. We can't lose focus. Let's check the records of the support group, see if anyone has a criminal background." As we left the community center, the night air felt thicker, almost suffocating. My instincts screamed that we were getting closer to a dangerous truth. Just as we reached my car, my phone buzzed violently. I glanced down at the screen, a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You have no idea what you're getting into." My heart raced, fear pooling in my stomach. I showed the text to Thompson, who frowned deeply. "This is getting serious. We need to be cautious." I nodded, but deep down, a fire ignited within me. I couldn't back down now. The missing woman, the cryptic warnings, there was a sinister thread weaving through it all. I was determined to pull at it until it unraveled, even if it meant confronting the very darkness that haunted our town. As we drove into the night, I felt the weight of something looming over us, a shadowy presence that tightened its grip with each passing moment. My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. And just as I began to piece together the puzzle, a figure lunged from the shadows and everything went black. I stumbled out of the abandoned house, my heart racing in my chest like a wild animal trying to escape. The dim light of dusk cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, and I could still feel the chill of my assailant's breath on my neck. I glanced back at the house, now a looming silhouette against the darkening sky, and I fought the urge to look for him again. I needed to get to Detective Thompson. He was my only chance. "Thompson!" I shouted as I reached the police station, my voice echoing in the nearly empty hallway. I burst through the door of his office without knocking, my hands trembling. "You have to listen to me. I found something big." He looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed with concern. "Sarah, what happened?" His eyes scanned my face, searching for the signs of panic that I was trying to suppress. "I was attacked," I said, my voice shaking. "But before that, I found a hidden room in that old house. It had photographs of the victims, more than what we knew. I think it's connected to Jake, the man from the support group." "Slow down," Thompson said, leaning back in his chair, a mix of skepticism and intrigue in his gaze. "Jake? The mild-mannered guy who's been attending for years?" "Yes. I know it sounds crazy, but there's more to him than meets the eye. We need to confront him, now." He stood up, a sense of urgency washing over him. "All right, let's go. But we need to be careful. If he's involved, he could be dangerous." We rushed to the support group's meeting place, the air thick with tension. My mind raced with possibilities. Could Jake really be the killer? I recalled his quiet demeanor, the way he blended into the background. But then a nagging doubt crept in. What if he was just another victim of circumstance trapped in this web of horror? As we arrived, the room was empty, the chairs arranged in a circle as if the members had just left. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's check the back," Thompson said, motioning for me to follow. We moved cautiously, peeking into the corners, half expecting to find him lurking in the shadows. "Jake?" he called out, his voice echoing against the walls. Suddenly I heard a noise, a scuffle followed by a low thud. My heart raced as we moved toward the source. We pushed through a door at the back and there he was, Jake, sitting on the floor looking more startled than guilty. "What's going on?" Thompson demanded, his voice firm. I didn't do anything," Jake stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "I swear." "Then why were you hiding?" I pressed, stepping forward despite Thompson's warning glance. "I wasn't hiding. I was just trying to think. I've been so scared since the murders started." "I thought I could help," he said, his voice trembling. "Help how?" Thompson asked, crossing his arms. "By taking pictures of the victims? By stalking them?" No, you don't understand," Jake pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "I wanted to protect them. I thought if I could gather evidence, I could stop whoever was doing this." I exchanged a glance with Thompson, feeling a mixture of pity and suspicion. "Then why didn't you come forward earlier?" I asked, my voice softening. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Look at me. I'm just a nobody in that group. No one would listen to me. He looked up, tears brimming in his eyes. But I saw things. I heard things. Like what? Thompson pressed, his tone shifting slightly. Jake hesitated, and I could see the turmoil on his face. I saw someone watching us. Someone who didn't belong there. I thought it was just my imagination until the first murder happened. Why didn't you say anything? I interjected, feeling the urgency of the moment. I was scared. I didn't want to be the next victim. I thought I could gather proof first, but it's all my fault. His voice broke and he buried his head in his hands. Thompson took a step forward, his expression softening. We need your help, Jake. If you know something, now is the time to tell us. I can show you where I saw him. I think he might still be around. Jake's voice was barely audible, but his eyes glimmered with a flicker of hope. As we made our way back outside, I felt an unsettling sense creeping over me. Jake's panic felt genuine, but the danger was far from over. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still missing something, a piece of the puzzle that could turn everything upside down again. The shadows seemed to deepen around us, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. The dim light of the interrogation room flickered as I sat across from Jake, the man we had just arrested. His face, still pale from the shock of his arrest, looked different now, more vulnerable. I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Detective Thompson leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, studying Jake with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Why did you run, Jake? Thompson's voice was low and steady, but I could sense the underlying urgency. You could have come to us. Jake looked up, his blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. I thought I was protecting them, he said, his voice trembling. I swear I never harmed anyone. Was her Emily? She's the one you're looking for. The name hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean, Jake? What did Emily do? She's not who you think she is, he continued, his breath shaky. She's been manipulating all of us in the support group. I thought she was helping us, but she was using our pain to fuel her own darkness. I exchanged a glance with Thompson, who seemed equally captivated and wary. What do you mean by darkness? I pressed, my heart racing. She has this way of making you feel like you're the only person that matters to her, Jake replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But it's all a facade. She's been grooming us, selecting her targets, using our vulnerabilities against us. I tried to warn them, but no one would listen. They thought I was crazy. Why would she want to kill them? I asked, struggling to comprehend the twisted narrative unfolding before us. Jake swallowed hard, his hands trembling. It's her past. She was a victim once, and she cannot stand to see others heal. She believes that if she can't possess their pain, then she has to eliminate them. It's sick, I know, but it's true. Just then the door swung open and Emily strode in, confidence radiating from her like a dark cloud. Her presence filled the room, and I felt an immediate chill crawl up my spine. She wore a composed smile, but the malice in her eyes was unmistakable. Jake, you're making a mistake, she said, her voice smooth and disarming. You don't have to do this. We can work together. They won't believe you. They never do. Emily, this isn't what you think, Jake stammered, desperation creeping into his tone. You're the one who's been hurting us. Oh, Jake, she sighed, her expression shifting to one of mock pity. You poor thing. You think you're the hero here? You're just a pawn in a game you don't understand. I helped you when no one else would. I cared for you. Cared for us. I shot back, my voice rising. You turned us into your victims. You're twisted. She turned her gaze toward me, her smile unwavering. You think you're so brave, Sarah. But look at you. You're just as broken as the rest of them. You're no different. I felt my heart race as she spoke, her words striking a nerve. I had buried my own traumas deep, hidden behind my determination to uncover the truth. You won't manipulate us anymore, Emily, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thompson stepped forward, eyes blazing with authority. You need to come with us, Emily. You're under arrest for the murders of those women. Emily laughed, a cold, chilling sound. You think you can stop me? You're all just part of my story now. You'll see. I'm the one in control here. Before I could react, she lunged toward the door, but Thompson was faster. In a swift motion, he grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back and pinning her against the wall. Not today, he growled, his voice firm. As she was led away, I felt a mix of relief and dread wash over me. The nightmare was far from over. The investigation had uncovered layers of darkness I never imagined existed, and the scars of those revelations would linger long after the case was closed. After Emily was gone, I turned to Thompson, my voice barely above a whisper. What now? How do we heal from this? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. We take it one step at a time, Sarah. We help the survivors, but we can't forget what we've uncovered. There's darkness hiding in places we never expected. I nodded, knowing that the shadows of Riverside would haunt us long after the last page of this story was written. The twisted nature of humanity had revealed itself, and I could only hope that by shining a light on it, we could prevent it from consuming us entirely. Story 3. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the Ozark Mountains as we arrived at our campsite. I took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy scent of pine and damp soil mixed with a faint hint of smoke. It was the summer of 1995, and everything felt perfect. My friends and I were finally escaping the chaos of our daily lives for a weekend of adventure. Come on, Jake. Help me set up this tent. Emily called out, her voice bursting with enthusiasm. I turned to see her struggling with an overly ambitious pile of fabric and poles. Her auburn hair glinted in the sunlight, and I couldn't help but smile at her determination. Yeah, I'm coming, I replied, tossing my backpack onto the ground. I rushed over, and together we wrestled with the tent, laughing as it collapsed on us more than once. Maybe we should just sleep under the stars. Marcus chimed in, plopping down on the ground with a mock-exasperated look. His dark curls bounced as he laughed, and it was contagious. Not a chance. I'm not getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, Sarah shot back, her arms crossed defiantly. She was always the sensible one, but I admired her for it. Tom, sitting on a log nearby, strummed his guitar lazily. I mean, a little blood-sucking never hurt anyone, he joked, and we all erupted in laughter again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we gathered around the campfire, the crackling flames creating a cozy atmosphere. Shadows danced on the surrounding trees, and I felt a chill run down my spine, not entirely from the temperature drop. Tell us a ghost story, Jake. Emily urged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Yeah, make it scary, Marcus added, leaning forward. I cleared my throat, trying to summon my best storytelling voice. Alright, so there's this legend about a killer who roams these very woods. As I wove my tale, I noticed the way the flickering firelight illuminated their faces, casting a warm glow that felt safe, even as my story turned darker. I spoke of a man who had been wronged, left for dead, who returned to exact his revenge on anyone who dared to enter his territory. The more I spoke, the more I saw the tension in Emily's shoulders, the way Sarah's gaze flicked nervously toward the tree line. Come on, Jake, that's just a story. Tom laughed, though I could see a hint of unease in his eyes. Yeah, right? You're just trying to scare us. Emily chimed in, though I could tell she was trying to mask her discomfort with bravado. Just as I finished my story, a distant howl echoed through the trees, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. What was that? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Probably just a coyote, Marcus said dismissively, though I could tell he was trying to reassure himself more than anyone else. Or maybe it's the ghost of the killer. I teased, winking at Emily, but my heart wasn't in it. The howls felt too close, too real. We laughed it off, but as night fell, the jungle of trees surrounding us transformed into an ominous wall of shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. A rustle in the underbrush caught my attention, and I squinted into the darkness, searching for movement. Did you see that? I asked, feeling a lump form in my throat. See what? Emily replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. There was something, over there, I pointed into the trees. Shut up, Jake. You're just trying to freak us out, Tom said, though he too looked concerned. We decided to investigate, our laughter fading as we approached the edge of the campsite. The darkness swallowed us, and every crack of a twig felt like a heartbeat, quickening our breaths. Maybe we should head back, Sarah suggested, glancing nervously around. Just a bit further, I insisted, though I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. As we ventured deeper into the trees, I caught a glimpse of something darting between the trunks, a shadow. My heart raced, and I exchanged looks with Emily and Marcus. Did you see that? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Yeah, Marcus responded, though his bravado seemed to falter. Let's go back, Emily urged, her voice shaky. Just as we turned to leave, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that we were being watched. Whatever was out there had just seen us. And as we moved back toward the firelight, I couldn't help but sense that our weekend of fun was about to take a very different turn. The night air hung heavy with an unsettling tension as I lay in my sleeping bag, the sounds of the Ozark wilderness wrapping around me like a thick blanket. It was supposed to be a night filled with laughter and ghost stories, but sleep eluded me. I could hear Jake's soft snoring from the adjacent tent, and Emily and Marcus were still chatting quietly, their voices drifting through the thin fabric. I was lost in my thoughts when suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the tranquility. My heart raced as I bolted upright, adrenaline surging through my veins. What was that? I whispered, my voice trembling. I could hear the rustling of fabric as Jake jerked awake. What the hell was that? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes as he crawled out of his sleeping bag. It came from Marcus's tent, I said, panic rising in my throat. Without waiting for a response, I unzipped my tent and dashed into the cool night air, the ground beneath my feet damp with dew. Emily was already outside, her face pale with fear. Marcus, she called, her voice echoing into the darkness. Marcus, are you okay? Silence answered us and dread pooled in my stomach. I glanced around, squinting into the shadows, but all I could see were the looming trees, their branches swaying ominously in the breeze. Jake stumbled out of his tent, his hair tousled. What's going on? He asked, still half asleep. Marcus is missing, I shouted, my voice rising as panic took hold. We need to find him. Let's check inside his tent, Emily suggested, her voice steadier than I felt. We rushed toward the small tent, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. As we unzipped the entrance, my heart sank. The tent was empty, but the ground outside was stained with dark smears of blood leading into the forest. Oh God, Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. What happened? Marcus? Jake shouted again, but his voice echoed back, filled with an eerie absence. We exchanged horrified glances, the reality of our situation sinking in. Let's follow the blood, I said, though every instinct in me screamed to run in the other direction. As we moved deeper into the woods, the shadows seemed to close in around us, the trees whispering secrets we couldn't understand. I felt a chill run down my spine, the night feeling alive with unseen eyes watching us. Do you think he's okay? Emily asked, her voice shaking. I don't know, I admitted, trying to mask my own fear. But we have to keep looking. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made us freeze. The sound was close, too close. What was that? Jake whispered, his eyes wide with terror. I don't know, I stammered. Just then a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and menacing, shrouded in darkness. My heart stopped. Get back, I yelled, raising my flashlight as the figure lunged at us. It was a person, their face obscured by a grotesque mask, a machete glinting in the faint light. Run! I screamed, my instincts kicking in as panic surged through my veins. We turned and bolted, the adrenaline propelling us forward. I could hear the sound of the machete slicing through the air behind us, panic fueling my speed. This way, I shouted, veering off the path into the dense underbrush. Emily stumbled and I reached back to grab her arm. Keep going. We can't stop. I could feel my lungs burning as we raced through the trees, branches clawing at my clothes. Behind us, I heard a cry, a sickening sound that sent chills racing down my spine. Emily! I shouted, but she was right beside me, her eyes wide with terror. Tom, she gasped, glancing back. Where's Marcus? I don't know, I yelled, despair threatening to consume me. We have to find somewhere to hide. Just then, the figure burst through the trees behind us, the glint of the machete catching the moonlight. Run! I screamed again, fear propelling us forward. In a frantic search for safety, we stumbled upon a small clearing. My heart raced as I spotted an old cabin in the distance. There. I pointed, urgency coursing through my veins. We can hide there. We sprinted toward the cabin, the sound of our racing hearts pounding in our ears. As we reached the door, Jake yanked it open and we rushed inside, slamming it shut behind us. Breathing heavily, we leaned against the door, listening to the muffled sounds of the night. It was quiet now, but the tension hung thick in the air. We exchanged terrified glances, the reality of what we had just encountered settling in. What the hell just happened? Jake finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. I don't know, but we have to figure out what to do next, I replied, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The cold air bit at my skin as Tom and I sprinted through the dense underbrush, our hearts pounding in rhythm with our frantic footsteps. The sound of our breath was almost drowned out by the rustling leaves, but the distant echoes of something far more sinister drove us forward. I could still hear Emily's scream ringing in my ears, her terror sending chills down my spine. We have to keep moving, I shouted, glancing back over my shoulder, half expecting to see the masked figure lunging at us from the shadows. Where do we go? Tom gasped, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. We can't just run blindly. I spotted a flicker of light through the trees, A small cabin, worn and dilapidated, barely visible in the moonlight. There. I pointed, urgency overriding my instincts. We can hide in there. Without waiting for Tom's response, I dashed toward the cabin, pushing through the underbrush until we reached the door, which creaked ominously as I swung it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of rot and mildew. The weak moonlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting eerie shadows across the floor. "This place is a nightmare," Tom muttered, following closely behind as I quickly stepped inside, scanning the room for anything we could use to defend ourselves. "Help me barricade the door," I urged, grabbing a rickety wooden chair and dragging it toward the entrance. Tom nodded, a look of determination overtaking his fear as he grabbed another piece of furniture. Together, we shoved the chair against the door just as we heard a crunch of leaves outside. "He's out there," Tom whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "What if he finds us?" "Shoo," I hissed, holding my breath as I strained to listen. The silence was suffocating, punctuated only by the occasional rustle outside. My heart raced as I crouched down, peering through a crack in the door. "We need to stay quiet. We can't let him know we're here." Suddenly, a low, mocking laugh echoed from outside, chilling me to the bone. "Oh, come on, boys. You think you can hide?" The voice was taunting, sending a wave of dread coursing through me. "This game is just getting started." Who is that?" Tom whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know, but we can't let him in," I replied, my mind racing with thoughts of the horror we had already faced. "We have to find a weapon or something to defend ourselves." Just then, I noticed an old hunting knife resting on a dusty shelf in the corner. "Look." I pointed it out to Tom, who moved toward it cautiously. He carefully picked it up, the blade glinting ominously in the dim light. "Do you think it'll be enough?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. "It has to be," I replied, though doubt gnawed at me. "We just need to find a way out of here and make it back to the others." As we crouched in the shadows, waiting for the sounds outside to fade, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air thickened with tension, and every creak of the cabin felt like a warning. "What if Emily and Sarah are okay?" Tom said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "What if they're out there searching for us?" "They'll be fine," I lied, though a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. "They know we'd come here if we needed to hide." But even as I said it, I felt a flicker of doubt. Would they be searching for us, or were they in trouble as well? The thought sent another shiver through me. Then the taunting voice returned, closer this time. "You can't hide forever, Jake. I know you're in there. You'll pay for what you did." My blood ran cold. What did he mean? I whispered to Tom, panic rising again. "I don't know, but we can't let him in," he replied, gripping the knife tightly. We exchanged worried glances, the weight of our situation pressing down on us like a physical force. The walls of the cabin felt like they were closing in, and the darkness outside seemed to pulse with malevolence. Every second stretched into eternity, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of our hearts beating in our chests, a reminder that we were still alive, still fighting, but for how long? The night hung heavily around us, cloaked in an oppressive silence that gnawed at my insides. Tom and I had spent what felt like a lifetime huddled in that decrepit cabin, adrenaline still coursing through our veins since we had escaped the slasher's clutches. The darkness outside was thick, almost tangible, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, even from the safety of our makeshift fortress. "Do you think they're okay?" Tom's voice broke through the quiet, tremulous with worry. "I don't know," I replied, my heart racing as I thought of Emily and Sarah. "We have to go back. We can't just leave them out there." Tom ran a hand through his hair, his brow creased with concern. "But what if the slasher is still around? What if he's waiting for us?" I glanced out the grimy window, the moonlight barely illuminating the trees that seemed to sway ominously in the wind. "If we don't try, we'll never know. They could be in trouble. We owe it to them." After a moment's hesitation, Tom nodded, resignation etched on his face. "Okay, let's do this. But we need a plan." As we gathered whatever we could find in the cabin, a rusty crowbar and a couple of flashlights, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. We had to believe we could save them. Stepping outside, the cool night air hit my face like a slap, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the cabin. We moved cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness as we retraced our steps back to the campsite. The woods loomed around us, alive with the sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves, but it all felt wrong, unnatural. When we reached the campsite, an eerie emptiness greeted us. The fire pit was cold and dark, the embers long extinguished, and our tent stood abandoned, flapping gently in the breeze. "This isn't right," I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. "Where are they?" Maybe they went to look for us? Tom suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. I scanned the area looking for any signs of life, but all that remained were the remnants of our gear strewn about. A backpack, a couple of sleeping bags. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. This doesn't make any sense. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. From somewhere deep within the woods, I heard it, a voice soft and haunting. Jake. Tom, did you hear that? I asked, turning to Tom, who looked as pale as a ghost. Yeah. What the hell was that? Maybe it's Emily or Sarah, I urged, my instinct to find them surging. Come on. We ventured deeper into the woods, the beam of our flashlights trembling as we moved further away from the campsite. The trees seemed to close in around us, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Jake, are you sure about this? Tom's voice wavered, but I pressed on, the whisper echoing in my mind. Sarah. Emily. I called out, but the only response was the rustling of leaves. My heart raced as I felt an unshakable sense of dread. Maybe we should go back, Tom suggested, glancing nervously over his shoulder. No. We can't. I snapped, frustration bubbling over. We have to keep looking. Just then, the whisper came again, more insistent this time, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Jake. Tom, who is that? Tom asked, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But it sounds like it's coming from right behind us, Tom interrupted, his voice thick with panic. Before I could respond, a shadow flitted between the trees and I turned sharply, the flashlight beam illuminating nothing but darkness. Did you see that? I breathed, my pulse racing. Yeah, I did. We need to go now. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't just run away, not without finding them. Wait. I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. We can't leave them. Jake, we have to get out of here. Tom insisted, grabbing my arm. But as I looked into the depths of the forest, I felt a pull as if someone, was beckoning me deeper into the shadows. I have to know. I can't just leave them. Then I'm not going with you. Tom yelled, his fear boiling over. You're going to get us killed? I felt a sinking sensation in my gut as he stepped back, his flashlight flickering uncertainly. Fine. But I'm not leaving without them. With that, I took a deep breath and plunged into the darkness, the whispering voice guiding me deeper into the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt heavier as I ventured further, the echoing call both a comfort and a curse. Please just be there, I murmured, praying for a miracle as the trees loomed ominously around me, shadows dancing in the moonlight. Little did I know, the true horror was just beginning to unfold, waiting for me in the depths of the night. The cabin felt like a tomb, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something more sinister. I leaned against the splintered wall, my heart racing as I glanced at Jake and Tom, who were pacing like caged animals. We can't stay here forever, I murmured, unsure if I was trying to convince them or myself. Jake stopped in front of me, his brow furrowed. We need to figure out what's going on. Emily's hurt and Marcus is still out there, somewhere. I nodded, still reeling from the chaos of the night before. Marcus was missing, and all that remained was a trail of blood leading into the dark forest. The thought sent chills down my spine. What if he's gone? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Tom shook his head. We can't think like that. We need to regroup and figure out where Emily is. She might know something we don't. Like what? I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. What could she possibly know that could help us now? Maybe something about Marcus's past, Jake interjected, his eyes narrowing in thought. She was always close to him. Maybe there's something there. The mention of secrets hung in the air like a heavy fog. Emily had always been the glue of our group, but I wondered if there was more to her connection with Marcus than we realized. I felt my stomach twist as I recalled the way she had looked at Marcus during our last campfire stories, the way her eyes had flickered with something unspoken. Suddenly the door creaked. We all froze, our breaths hitching in unison. What was that? I whispered, my voice cracking. Shoo. Jake hissed, pressing his finger to his lips. We listened intently, ears straining for any sound. Just then a soft voice echoed through the cabin, chilling me to the bone. Jake. Tom. Sarah. It was a whisper, but it felt like a scream. Is that Emily? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. No, Tom said, shaking his head. That's not her. The realization hit me like a slap. It was a taunt, a malicious game being played by someone who was enjoying our fear. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice trembling. As we moved toward the window, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow darting between the trees outside. There. Did you see that? I pointed, heart pounding against my rib cage. Yeah, but we can't just go out there, Jake said, urgency lacing his tone. We need a plan. I felt a surge of frustration. What kind of plan? We're just sitting ducks in here. Tom took a deep breath, steadying himself. We can't go back to the campsite. We know that much. But we can't stay here either. We need to find Emily and we need to do it fast. Let's check the other rooms in the cabin. There might be something useful, Jake suggested, and I nodded, grateful for the distraction from the creeping dread. We moved cautiously through the darkened cabin, every creak of the floorboards echoing like thunder in my ears. In the back room we found a dusty old trunk. I knelt down and pried it open, revealing a collection of rusted tools, old clothes, and, my breath caught, tattered photographs. Look at these, I called, pulling out a handful of faded pictures. The faces stared back at us, some familiar, some not. Is that Marcus? Jake stepped closer, his expression shifting from curiosity to horror. What the hell? Why does he look so different? Tom leaned in, his eyes wide with realization. These photos, they're from years ago, before we met him. Why would he have these? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. What's he hiding? Just then a figure appeared in the doorway. My blood turned to ice. The slasher stood there, a menacing silhouette against the dim light. The machete glinted ominously in his hand. Looking for something? He taunted, his voice dripping with malice. Run! Jake shouted, but it was too late. The moment I turned to flee, the door slammed shut behind us, sealing our fate. The night was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of pine and something more sinister. I could barely grasp the reality of what was happening. The cabin, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap, each creak of the floorboards echoing like a countdown to doom. Emily and Sarah were huddled in a corner, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. I could feel my heart racing, a wild drumbeat in my chest as I turned to Tom. Do you think it could really be Marcus? I whispered, uncertainty clawing at my throat. Tom shook his head, his brow furrowed. No way. He's dead. We saw the blood, or we thought we did, I interrupted, my mind racing. What if he faked it? What if he's been out there waiting for us this whole time? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. A moment later, a loud crash jolted us from our thoughts. The door rattled violently as if something, or someone, was trying to break in. Panic surged through me. We need to barricade it, I shouted, scrambling to push a nearby table against the door. As Tom and I wedged the furniture against the door, Emily spoke up, her voice trembling. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. Like what? I snapped, my frustration boiling over. We can't just run out there into the woods with that thing out there. Jake, listen to me, Emily insisted, her eyes locking onto mine. We need to face this together. If it really is Marcus, we can reason with him. He wouldn't hurt us, right? Are you sure about that? I retorted, but deep down I knew we couldn't stay in this cabin forever. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the shadows seemed to stretch and writhe as if they had a life of their own. Suddenly, the door buckled with a forceful thud, causing us to jump. Get back! I shouted, moving to grab a broken piece of wood from the fireplace. Tom followed suit, clutching a rusty old axe he had found. Maybe we can scare him off, he suggested, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Another thud and the door cracked. I'm coming in, a voice boomed from outside, distorted and chilling. You think you can hide from me? I'm going to make you pay. Marcus. The name slipped from my lips like a prayer, but it felt like a curse. You're alive? Alive? No, Jake. I'm reborn. The voice was maddening, echoing through the cabin, and I could hear the laughter mingling with the rage. You all left me to die. You forgot about me. No, we didn't. I yelled back, my heart pounding. We thought you were dead. We thought what? That I would just disappear? The door splintered, and I could see a shadow looming, glimmering steel in hand. I'm back for you all. For everything. In that moment, everything shifted. The reality of our situation crashed down on me like a wave. I felt the anger rise within me, mixed with betrayal and fear. Why, Marcus? Why would you do this? Because you deserve it. He pushed the door open with a final shove, and the wood splintered, leaving him standing there, a monstrous figure draped in darkness, his face obscured by a mask. You abandoned me? I stared into the abyss of his eyes, the rage reflected back at me. We're your friends, Marcus. We were friends? You call that friendship? He lunged toward us and instinct kicked in. I swung the piece of wood, barely grazing his shoulder as he stumbled back. Run! I yelled at Emily and Sarah. Get out of here. But Sarah didn't move. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice steady and calm. Marcus, please listen to me. We can talk about this. Talk? He spat, the word laced with venom. There's nothing to talk about. Before I could react, Sarah lunged at him, throwing herself in his path. You don't have to do this. We can help you. Sarah, no. I shouted, but it was too late. In a flash, Marcus raised the machete, and I heard the sickening sound of metal meeting flesh. Everything froze. Sarah's scream echoed through the cabin, a sound that would haunt my dreams. Run, Jake. Get out of here, she cried even as she fell. Tom and I stumbled back, our minds scrambling to comprehend the horror unfolding before us. I could hardly breathe, my heart shattered into a million pieces. No, Sarah. As we turned to flee, I glanced back one last time, seeing Marcus standing over her, the mask glistening with the remnants of what he had just done. The raw, primal instinct to survive took over as Tom and I burst through the back door, into the suffocating darkness of the woods. We couldn't stop running, the shadows shifting around us, whispering our names. The sound was unmistakable, echoing in the wind, as if the very forest was alive with our fears. Just as we reached the edge of the clearing, the distant sound of sirens rang out. Help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our nightmare was far from over. The campfire stories we had shared under the stars had morphed into a reality that would forever haunt me. As I stood at the forest's edge, the whispers grew louder, entwining with my thoughts. I looked back, the darkness swallowing everything, and I couldn't help but wonder if Marcus was still out there, waiting.